What is going on, everyone? AP over here at Run Pier Sports, bringing to you once again. We are doing the lineup building show. We are focused on an awesome game tonight, Chiefs Chargers. I'm very excited to break it down. We do this with our partner SABERSIM, and I got my guy. I got Jordan from over at SABERSIM. Jordan, what's going on, man? How are you doing today?
I'm good. Very excited to break this one down. I think might be the best primetime NFL game we get all regular season here. I think some particular angles on this game are really interesting. Excited to show off some of the things that make SABERSIM pretty cool for NFL Showdown in particular. So yeah, I've been looking forward to this one all morning. Just excited to get into this.
Yeah, I am as well. And we had a lot of good feedback last week. Just focusing on the showdown slate. So I've been getting a few questions. We do the show on Thursday. Every Thursday throughout football, the rest of the year, into next year. Are we going to only focus on showdown since it's on Thursday? No, that is not the case. As Jordan and I talk behind the scenes, the game is going to dictate if we're going to talk about that game or not. There's going to be some terrible Thursday night games. There always is. Tonight, not the case. We got the Chargers, we got the Chiefs, almost a 55-point total. I'm a Chiefs homer. I'm a Chiefs guy. So, take the takes as you will tonight. I mean, we all know, everyone knows where we're going to be at tonight. But the focus of this show isn't necessarily to give you the plays or anything like that. We're going to talk SABERSIM. We're going to show you how to use the tool. And we're going to share with you some strategies and just some things that you can do using Saber specifically for Showdown that we think is going to give you an edge depending on what type of contest that you are selecting. So if you could hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, it helps us out a ton here. We're doing this for free each and every week for you, for the people. Jordan, give us let's do what we did last week.
Yeah.
So what we did here's kind of the agenda for the show. We're going to do what I call a baseline build. A baseline build, and I use it if you follow the premium articles that I do every Thursday, Sunday, Monday for all the main showdown slates. A baseline build is what I use for research. I just want to see what the optimal is giving me. I don't change any projections or anything like that. Jordan, walk through kind of the baseline and what we're looking at here in SABERSIM for the game tonight.
Yeah, so I think that is by far the best practice of how you can use SABERSIM virtually for anything, but especially for NFL Showdown, is starting with that baseline build. I call it a test build a lot too on some of our shows. And what it's basically going to do for Showdown is it is going to go through, we have tens of thousands of simulations of the way that this game could play out. And it's going to go through, it's going to pick a random single game simulation, build the optimal lineup for that sim, then go to the next lineup, pick another random game simulation, build the optimal lineup for that sim. So what you're going to end up with is actually a pool of like 500 different optimal lineups for the way that the game could actually play out. And I think this is like particularly valuable and really cool just because other tools out there can't really do this. Like if you try to do this on almost any other optimizer, just with average projections, all you're going to do is just get a ton of lineups that would be viable in like cash games. These are actually going to be legit single game simulation optimals that you can work with. You can start to get an idea of what could happen in this game. What are the possible game scripts? What are the possible constructions? And I think even if ultimately you end up going back to the projections tab, which we will do here in a bit and making some adjustments there, this is a great place to start. And to be completely honest, for me, there's a lot of slates where this ends up being my final build once I craft things and tweak things and get things where I want. So I always recommend starting with a build just to see how things are looking before you start going and turning things all around.
Yeah, very good. And, one thing, so I noticed there 50 lineups, 500 lineup pool.
Yep.
The default, if you have more time, it's not going to matter for the show at all. But if you have more time, I always do 1,500. And what about the max salary there? I always just change it to 50,000. I don't really want to. I want it to be like a true baseline. I don't want to try to get anything that, any builds that's really going to be focused on getting leverage or uniques yet for this phase of it. But I mean, yeah. Is there any, are you pretty much doing that like standardly 1,500 min max 35K, 50K?
Yeah, I think that's good. The default there on the max salary is $49,900, mostly just to be kind of like a flag for people like, hey, if you want to reduce max salary to try to avoid duplicates in your lineups, that's maybe one option there. But yeah, I think for the initial test build, it makes sense to include the max salary builds in there. And yeah, increasing up to 1,500 just going to give you a lot more to work with. So I just ran another build here so we can work with this one instead. So we have that full 1,500 lineup pool. I always build 1,500 for my actual builds when it comes time to actually get lineups in. I just like having that nice big pool to work with. So
I do too. And the reason that I'm starting to learn why you want to do that is because of all of the changes that you can make in step 3.
Yep.
I think traditional optimizers, you have so much control on the front end, you kind of forget about how Saber is a, step 1, 2, 3 type of tool. And there's a lot that you could do on the back end. And actually, I found that like it's far more optimal, especially in showdown formats for me to make these changes on the back end. So I'm really curious. When I did this for my article, but I ran it on, so talk to me about this. And I could pull up my article, but when I ran it on, you guys had them up like Monday or Tuesday. I started building my article on Monday. I had to be Tuesday. And so it was crazy how you guys had all the projections, initial sims ran up from that point to where you get them up to the game. How many different, are you making any adjustments on the back end that we should be aware of, or are things just pretty much set in there? And then now it's tossed over to the user to start making adjustments.
Yeah. So, I mean, it can kind of depend. So there's always an initial first round sim. I think that went up yesterday. You could start looking at the slate, start playing around, looking at things. Obviously new sims will run when like big news breaks. So I think we ran a new one when we got confirmation that Keenan Allen was out. This morning when we got news that it's Matt Amendola kicking for the Chiefs here. Tonight we ran another sim, and there's one final sim that runs around an hour before kickoff for every single NFL game. That's kind of what you can really treat as final. That will incorporate the official inactives for both teams, any last minute news that we get, any last minute kind of manual adjustments we're making on our end. So obviously we're doing this here in the middle of the day here. So this could change. That final sim will be 1 hour before kickoff.
So Jordan, this baseline looks very similar to what I got. And so how you do that, you just do exactly what Jordan just did there. My initial takeaway, and we're going to go into the stack types, game, team stacks, et cetera. But my initial takeaway when I'm looking at this game tonight, when I look at these two teams, we got two of the best quarterbacks in the league. Throw Josh Allen there. You got 1, 2, 3, in my opinion. You have what I feel is probably, one of the most fundamentally sound quarterbacks in Justin Herbert. And then, when the game is on the line, Pat Mahomes, I would think is the guy that I want. Obviously, everyone knows that's my guy and that's what I want. But what I found really interesting in this baseline test build, we're not getting much Pat Mahomes and we're not getting much Justin Herbert. So that was something I just make note of. And I go, okay, interesting. We're not getting that, most likely because, their projection isn't high enough, et cetera. But they are fitting. One thing that's cool is if you go to the right there, you can see when we run 1,500, they're still Pat Mahomes is still hitting 20% of captain in the entire pool, right? So just because he's not hitting it in these initial builds in our top 150, it's still in the pool there, and you can still pull those builds in, and that's kind of something that we're gonna show everyone and talk about how that works. Talk us through the screen though. What's everyone seeing here, and then take us through the stack types. That's where I've been doing a lot of adjustments myself, and then also the team stack section.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned it. So we built 1,500 lineups here. And we're looking at a build of 50. I know that's the number you mentioned last week that you normally roll with here. So that's just a subset of what we got out of these 1,500. The way they're actually sorted right off the bat is by SABERScore. And what SABERScore actually does for NFL Showdown is pretty cool. So what it's doing is it's trying to figure out, are there any lineups in the pool that are optimal for more than one game sim, right? That would be a good thing, right? If there was one possible lineup that is optimal for 4 or 5 or 10 different game scripts, 10 different game sims, we would want to play more of that sim. Or more of that lineup. So that's given a boost to SABERScore when that happens. Other than that, we're looking at what lineups have the highest overall top 1% percentile in their scoring. So we built 1,500 game sims, but we're looking at the top for lineups that show up as optimal frequently and overall have very high scoring potential at that top 1%. But you can see here, right? We have, our most popular captain in our top 50 is Josh Palmer, 20%. But we actually have 20% Patrick Mahomes lineups in that whole pool of 1,500. So your pool is going to be very flexible. There's a lot that you can do here. There's a lot of room to make adjustments generally for NFL Showdown. And it's not necessarily, if you have no idea what to do, your top 50 is going to be a really good starting point. But if you have a lot of ideas of what you want to do, there's probably a lot of ways to start making adjustments here and improving your lineup. So you mentioned stack types. Is that where you wanted to start here?
Yeah, I love that stack type section because in Showdown, for me, I'm never playing 3-3s, especially in a game like this where the total's very high and the spread is close, a back and forth type game. I think the standard build that people like to make is like a 3-3.
Yep.
I can immediately get different by putting a 0 there under max exposure. I've eliminated every 3-3 build from the pool of 1,500. Now I'm working with only 5 1s and 4 2s. And so, I mean, you could take it a step further in 5-1. If you're focused on uniques, I mean, man, look at that. 18.1% of builds in the entire pool are only 5-1 stacks. So that tells me if you truly just want to like search for uniques, run all 5-1 builds. You're probably going to get the most optimal uniques doing that. Now, is that going to pan out? No, we've seen it hit 2 games ago, I believe. And then last game on Monday night was a 4-2. I still don't think we've seen a 3-3 hit. So I feel very confident with that. And I usually get some sort of balance between 5-1s and 4-2s. And especially tonight, there are some really interesting 5-1s that we're going to talk about that we talked about before the show started. And then, of course, there's a lot of good 4-2s that we can talk about.
Yeah, I agree. And on games that have a generally pretty close spread, you're going to have pretty even projections for a lot of the top players in the pool. I think the field often over gravitates towards those 3-3 kind of builds. I like doing stuff like this too as well, getting to some of those 4-2s and 5-1 stacks. Real quickly, just for people that are maybe seeing this for the first time, I just kind of want to redo what I just did. So what we did, we hopped over to the stack types, which is summarizing the constructions we have in our pool. And I'm setting a max exposure here to 0, right? I'm saying I want 0% of that particular construction. And this is where that pool ends up being so valuable to us. So instead of having to start over and rebuild and do that all over again, instead it's just saying, okay, you only want 4-2s and 5s. Here are the best 50 4-2s and 5s you can play from your 1,500 lineups. And as we continue to move forward here and make more and more adjustments, that's what's going to keep happening. It's going to say, oh, okay, you only want these guys at captain. Here's the best 50 you can play. Oh, you want to play, lineups that are overweight to one team. Here's the best 50 you can play, and so on. That's why this pool is so powerful.
Yeah, very good. And then additionally, if you want to take a step further, you could just put a 50 in there under min exposure for 5-1s.
Yeah.
And you'll see that it'll change and there you go. Yeah. So now you have a nice balance there between 5-1s and 4-2s. Now I go to the team stacks next time because now I can see, okay, we know what the structure is of all the builds that we're looking at. How does it look from a team standpoint? Are we heavier Chiefs or Chargers? So that's kind of what I do in this next area.
Yeah, I do too. And, for me, I typically like to flip the script a little bit here. And if I'm going to play lineups that are favored more to one team than the other, a lot of times just to get a little bit different, I like to play the underdog. I'm actually a little bit surprised to see that that's kind of what we're getting naturally here right off the bat. At least in our top 50, we're getting, more Chargers 5 stacks than Chiefs 5 stacks, more Chargers 4 stacks than Chiefs 5 stacks. Where's your head at for this game tonight on how you want that balance to look for your build?
So a really interesting thing you said that I think I know why. And that will be back in step 1, part of the other research thing that I do, or we both do, I believe. But that's just looking at player correlations. So I like when we rerun this, when we add some bias to it, that's something we can take a look at. Gary in chat, what up, Gary? Really good question. Wouldn't it be better to X out 3-3s in step 1? So is there a difference? Should you put that rule in step 1, or is it fine just to do it in step 3? I've been doing it in step 3, and I've been pretty satisfied with what my results are. But do you have an opinion on that, Jordan?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's a little technical. In a practical level, it's not going to make a ton of a difference. I would say, at least run one build without the rule just to see how things are looking. You might miss something. You might miss something about the overall strategy for the slate by just putting that in first things first. The one other concern here I have is when we're building these lineups, right? We're using single game simulations to build each lineup. So we pull a sim, we build the best lineup for that. Anything that you put in step one in the projections tab is telling the builder how to build lineups. So it might pull a sim out where the optimal is actually a 5-1, but because you said force a 3-3, now it has to make that lineup a 3-3. It's using like maybe what is actually the second or third or fourth best lineup for that sim to fit it into a 3-3. When we do that in the post build process after the builds instead, we're just filtering the pool. So the pool is all 1,500 perfect optimals for individual game sims. And we're not saying, force a lineup where the optimal is a 3-3 into a 5. We're just saying, I just only want to play lineups where the optimal is a 5. So that answer, I know, gets kind of technical and it can be a little bit confusing. Ultimately, on a practical level, if you know what kind of construction you want, there's nothing really wrong with putting it ahead of time. I think it is best practice, though, especially for NFL Showdown, where your sim precision is 10, to do as much as possible after the build.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So Gary can do it either way, but I run it. I'm running 1,500 anyway. So and I always do a quick glance over before I submit anything anyway. So yeah, how about let's do this? Let's after everyone hits that like button, we got 140 some in here watching. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, helps us out a ton. Let's rerun this. Let's add some bias. I'll talk to you about where I'm at. Not going to be too surprising for those out there, but here's the thing about these two teams is go and look at the target distribution that we saw even in week one. I mean, you can overreact if you want, but we know what these teams do. These teams know each other. Justin Herbert, very good quarterback, spreads it around. He doesn't lock onto one receiver like what we saw from the Raiders last week, where I think we had some crazy target share there. Mm-hmm. We're not gonna we're outside of maybe Travis Kelce and Mike Williams. So here's what I was talking about, Jordan. If you click on their names, you could click on Pat Mahomes or Justin Herbert, either one. I always like looking at, and you talked about this last week, so I started doing this, adding it into my research process. I like seeing the correlation there. And it's so interesting on the Kansas City side. This makes so much sense. Pat Mahomes apologized to everyone at the start of the season saying, hey, fantasy players, it's going to be, roulette as far as like who gets the touchdowns. That shows in the correlation here. Yep. Obviously, Travis Kelce with the most positive correlation there, followed by MVS. What's really surprising is McCole Hardman and Juju Smith-Schuster. I would have Juju up higher, but talk to us about where these numbers are typically coming from the back end on Saber side.
Yeah, so these are the average correlations across the full range of outcomes of the sim. So, I mentioned before, we're doing play-by-play sims thousands of times here, all these different game scripts. This will be a number that it's essentially trying to describe how related are these two players' outcomes. How much does Patrick Mahomes having a big game make it more likely that any of these players are having a good game? And I think this is actually, I've never actually thought about doing it in this way. I think this is kind of a cool way of visualizing how involved people are in the offenses by looking at how correlated they are to the quarterback. I think there's a compelling argument here to be made that this passing attack is more spread out than people give it credit for.
Like if you looked up, going back to the Raiders and Devontae Adams getting 17 targets, you would see a much stronger correlation number. I would think. I mean, you could go. I think Mike Williams was the highest on tonight's game. Nice. You're able to pull that up.
Let's do it real quick.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because I think Mike Williams is a 0.40 correlation to Herbert. There you go, 0.48. So a much stronger, correlation metric. Yeah, just really something that I found interesting, and it makes sense when you think about the Chiefs, where Mahomes is this offense I think is going to be really difficult to stop this year. I think by not having Tyreek Hill there, we can't say that's a positive. There's nothing. I'm not saying that at all. But Mahomes is always tempted to throw the ball deep. And Staley and the Chargers, they want to tempt Mahomes into throwing it deep and to trap him. One thing that they're so good at is taking away big plays. Now, like what we saw last week, they're not, I mean, they late in the game or later in the game, I think it was the second half, they went deep a couple times to McCole Hardman. But I mean, most of these plays were, 7 to 15 yards down the field, and he has so many weapons that he can go to. And so there's just going to be a very difficult offense to stop. And when you think of what the Chargers like to do on defense, I think this is going to be a very difficult matchup for them. Obviously, I'm a homer. We all know that. Obviously, I was surprised that the betting public is on the Chiefs. I thought everyone would gravitate towards the Chargers at +4, and I was hoping that would be the more popular side. Not the case. So you could say the sharp bet here tonight is the Chargers +4. I think Herbert has to have a monster game for them to cover because, man, I think just this Chiefs offense is so efficient now. They get a true test tonight for sure, but Mahomes looks more dialed in than ever. So, okay, with that in mind, how do we adjust this script? I do this two different ways. One, I add my bias in by manually adjusting the projections. One question. So I believe I know the answer, but if you adjust the projection in the flex or the cap, then it adjusts for either side, right? Yeah, I mean, you can't have a much higher. Okay, just I had that. Some people ask me that, and I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, I think it adjusts automatically. That's been my assumption. I've never really looked into it though. The other way is the team totals up here. So you guys have Kansas City at 29.2, the Chargers at 25.2. I think this game's going over. I think both defenses are going to struggle to stop each other. That's kind of the popular consensus. It is a Thursday game. If you want to be the ultra contrarian tonight, sometimes these Thursday games, even with good offenses out there, are just tough and kind of brutal with that little turnaround. But I don't see it. So I think the Chiefs win big. So what I did, and we don't have to do this for this script right now, but I moved the KC up over 35, and I moved the Chargers right around 27, 28. So I gave a big adjustment to the Chiefs, and then I gave a field goal type adjustment to the Chargers. And talk us through this process. What's going on here?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the cooler tools that you can do on SABERSIM here for those kinds of adjustments. So what happened? So I went and I changed the Chargers total to 28. I changed the Chiefs total to 35, just like you said. So what we're going to do is we'll go through the sims themselves and basically look at the sims and say, okay, what are the average player projections? What do players score when the Chargers average output is 28 and when the Chiefs output is 35 on average? And you can see that automatically adjusted each player's projection in the pool. So Pat Mahomes, when the Chiefs score 35 instead of 28 on average, he's making a jump, almost 3 fantasy points, just raw fantasy points. I mean, obviously that converts to 4.5 or almost 5 points at the captain spot. So a pretty big adjustment. The best part about this, though, what I think is so cool is that you'll get a correlated change. So every player will get bumped up accordingly based on, what actually happens to those players in the sims. And in this case, since we bumped up both teams by a fair bit, everybody's just getting a bump. But, sometimes we play different game scripts on this show. And like last week, I think we made an adjustment where the wide receivers and the tight ends and the quarterbacks all got a boost up, but the running backs actually got a knock down because that's what happens in those sims. I think if you want to play a very specific game script or target a different angle in the way that you're approaching the game, this is one of the best ways to do it because it's going to have those nice correlated changes, and you're still you're basically still using the sims in your builds. You're just looking at a different subset of those sims where the game goes over. So even if you totally disagree with AP and you're like, hey, I think the Chargers win and I think the game goes under, you could do that too. You're still just looking at a different subset of sims.
Yeah, very, very good points there. The other way, the other reason I do it, I like using baseline stats, but I like to get a little bit different than where the industry's at, because I do think projections across the industry, especially as we get deeper into the season, they all kind of get pretty close to each other. A lot of sharp companies out there, obviously. A couple questions that came in. First, we got Josh Gilham. I love the name, but man, I don't like the comment, my man. You don't get better by losing Tyreek. I know that. That's not what I was saying. The Chiefs come back down to earth tonight. We'll see. we will see. Mahomes looks dialed. I haven't seen him look that good this early on in the season before. So, Chris, how do we know when a player is getting ceiling projection in the Sims? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way that I look at it is because we know that every lineup that you get when you build your lineups is an optimal for a single game sim. Like, you know that player has the ceiling to get there, right? Because it already is an optimal. One thing I'll show you, let me show you something here that can kind of be a useful tool here. I wanted to build another build here just to do this real quickly. Actually, you know what? Let me let this build, and then I'm gonna jump back over to the build we were doing a second ago, because I think there can be kind of a cool tool. Actually, let me just stop this because I want to show this. So one thing I think that can be helpful is using the percentiles as kind of a way of visualizing like what actually is happening in the game script where that lineup is built on. So let me go back to this build here. And one thing, you can only use these percentiles when you're not using custom projections. So I can't do it for the build that I did with the team total adjustments we just did. But if we come over here, let's reset this build, get things back to normal. Reset these projections as well. So this button here, this is your percentiles, right? So this is by default, we're just going to be looking at players' average projections. That doesn't mean they scored their average in the sim. That just means we're looking at the average right here. We can change this to something like, 95th, I think is generally pretty good. And by changing these to the 95th percentile, I think sometimes it'll help you to visualize like what actually is the game script that's happening in the sim behind the scenes, right? So now all of a sudden it's going to update this, and you can kind of see like, okay, 95th percentile, like how does this lineup work? Well, Juju Smith-Schuster is going off, right? We're getting the ceiling Pat Mahomes game. We're getting the shootout game script where Justin Herbert goes off. We get all of these kind of cheaper pass catchers that are now viable with Keenan Allen out. When you're looking at the projections as the percentiles instead, I think it can kind of help you visualize a little bit more like how that lineup actually gets there. In the back end, it's an optimal lineup from a sim, no matter what, whether you're using the percentiles or not. But these, I think, can be helpful to kind of figure out like what is that guy's actual upside.
I'm glad you brought that up. I use that often for NBA just to get an idea of what some of these like high upside builds would look like when you're right in the mid range there. I think how you use that tonight, if you want to, because you can, if you're in step one, you can see the percentiles and you can see what the projection is, I believe, right? If you just scroll to the right, can't you see the breakdown of like 65%, 75%?
On the projection step?
On the projection step. So you can manually do it yourself. What I'm getting at is in these games where, I mean, man, I think Mahomes targeted 9 playmakers. I think Herbert targeted 8 or 9. And what you could get, or at least what I think is going to happen, is I feel far more confident in the floor ceiling combination from Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert tonight than I do from any one receiver beating me. Like, I don't like, sure, could a Kelsey or a Juju, like, could Kelsey get, what does he need? Seven catches, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. If that happens, he's most likely going to be in the captain spot, and that can happen. It's Kelsey. But what's more likely? What have we seen, and what do we know from Mahomes now, who's going to distribute the ball? Could we see a 400-yard type game, 4 touchdown, where he's throwing 4 touchdowns to 4 different receivers? I think that the likelihood of that outcome is pretty high. And no matter the scenario, Mahomes is going to bring in a really nice floor. So what I did is and you could do this either way. You could go and look at the percentile, and you could grab the 90th percentile from Mahomes, and then maybe and then you got to manually do this, I believe, right? If you go to the right, can't you see the breakdown, or
so you can add them. So if you want to see those percentiles over here, you can go in and say like, hey, show me there
you go,
75th, 85th, 95th percentiles. We have 99th there as well. I will just say, be careful with the 99th percentile stuff. Just because that's like a really extreme outcome. But yeah, if you want to see like, hey, what are my 75th, 85th, and 95th percentiles here, you can pull those in.
So that's kind of like what I was getting at. That's kind of what I did for my build. I ended up bumping up. So like after in step one, after I bumped up the team totals from each side, playing on an over script where maybe the Chiefs win by a touchdown, I bumped a few players in addition, like to the natural bump that I got. It was Patrick Mahomes. It was Justin Herbert. I just think those guys, and with how they distribute the ball, I want more of them in the captain spot naturally. And I saw from my initial research here, they weren't hitting at a high rate. And I want to load up. This is the one spot where I want to load up with Mahomes or Herbert in the captain spot. And so that's one adjustment that I made. So have we ran with the adjustments? Oh, the other thing I did, and normally I'm a huge fan of kickers, and at RPS we normally are. We got to fade. You can fade both kickers, but definitely fading the Chargers kicker tonight. Brandon Staley and the Chargers do not kick field goals against Mahomes. In the last two games that we saw last year, 60 points I think were scored on the Chargers side. One field goal kick in that entire game. They went for four. They went for it on fourth down a lot. So yeah. I am fading defenses. I'm fading kickers. Normally I love kickers. Not in this matchup, not today, and not with the Chiefs situation. I think you're going to see both teams get aggressive, especially on fourth down. So this is one spot where I'm definitely fading kickers on both sides, and then defenses. Outside of that, I'm not like, I don't want to fade. I don't want to just auto fade in either one of these playmakers on any side. I want to embrace the variance that we're going to see tonight, and I want to manage that kind of in step three. That was my approach. That's what I did for step one, and then I moved on. What are your thoughts with all of that, Jordan?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense. I think that's a pretty good nugget there as well with the Chargers kicker last year. Makes a lot of sense. I hadn't even thought of that, but I think the fade fits there. Yeah, so I mean, right off the bat, I think this is a good example again to just kind of mention here with the quarterbacks, right? Like you might be looking at this and you're like, hey, I bumped up the Chiefs by basically a touchdown. I'm still only getting 20% Mahomes. There's more Mahomes in the pool if you want to go get it. So if like that's your guy and you're taking a heavy stand, I mean, we can get 3x. If we're thinking 15% on Patrick Mahomes right now at captain, we could get 3x that pretty easy, 45% at captain. And we'll just go through the pool there and pull out those Mahomes lineups. If we want to do the same thing with Herbert, right? Get a lot of Herbert in there, maybe not 45%, but maybe we go out and get 30% at Herbert captain. Same deal there. And we'll just see the lineups kind of automatically adjust here. One thing, or go ahead.
I was going to say, let's go back through that process then, like stack types, or if you do something different, have at it. But I mean, there are so many unique things that you can do. I think just by, instead of controlling the players, controlling the team exposures, and then I always just like to look at them and see, and I'm always surprised at some of the builds that I see and I really like. And then you can always adjust them, and we'll show you how do you do that, manually. If there's a player that you don't like and you want to swap them out, you can do that very easily.
Yeah, no. So I do kind of a similar thing with my constructions. Again, I think that 3-3, this isn't necessarily every single showdown for me, but I think it's often overplayed. And
that's, we had a question in chat, just to interrupt real quick. What game environment is good for a 3-3 build? I would not look at it like that. I would look at it, unless things change, I would look at it that by default, your average people out there really love to play these 3-3 builds. I get, buddies will send them to me all the time in a game. Like I guarantee I'll get them tonight, and it'll be like 3 players from one team, 3 from the other. Mm-hmm. It feels good. It just feels like a good build because you're getting both sides of the game. And so I'm not building it trying to predict the script. This is a pure, I know by eliminating that right now in today's kind of showdown market, we're getting different already. And that's what I want to do. I want to stay optimal, but I want to get different slightly. So that's how I view it. Could a 3-3 win? Sure, a 3-3 could. I view it as getting leverage purely on the people that I'm playing against,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, the one situation I'll play it or at least consider it is if you've just got like a bad looking game with like a 10.5 point spread or something like that. To me, then you start to almost think, well, maybe the 4-2 or the 5-1 builds of the favorite are going to start to be pretty popular here. Maybe we do get a little bit different with the 3-3, but I think you're right. Most of the time, people it's a psychology thing. People like to feel like they're getting both sides. Even just like from watching the game and sweating your lineup, you kind of always want to feel like you've got something to sweat no matter who has the ball. And people build like that. And there's a good way to get different just by eliminating that right off the bat.
Yeah, very good. Let's so yeah, we eliminated the 3-3s there. I think we both agree that that's optimal move tonight, especially in a game like this. People are going to want like Mahomes plus, I think you were talking about it before the show, like Mahomes plus one or two pass catchers and, Herbert plus. I just, I think we could see more 3-3s, tonight with how this game projects to play out the normal. So immediately getting different. And then now taking us through the team stacks. So what are you looking at right here? 2 stacks, 3 stack, 4, 5?
Yeah, so since we've already eliminated the three stacks, I'm basically just looking at the 4 and 5 stacks. I think we have something really interesting going on here tonight, where I actually think the chalky build, the popular construction, is going to be more Chargers than Chiefs. Not because they're the favorite, not because those players are going to project better at raw points, but because the value is on the Chargers. With Keenan Allen out, you've got, Josh Palmer, DeAndre Carter, Gerald Everett, like all these guys are going to project really well point per dollar. And I think this construction is going to be crazy popular, even though the Chiefs are favored in this game. I feel like very easy. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Look what we did. We made the Chiefs a greater favorite by adjusting the team score. We added our bias into it to make, I thought we would get more Chiefs stacks, but that is not the case. And that's what I saw too when I went through this, on my own, looking at my own builds. So I'm in 100% agreement with you. And especially when you look at the 5-man stacks, you're going to see, I was running builds where it's a Mahomes captain running it back with all Chargers players, a 5 flex Charger with Mahomes as the captain. Now, in what scenario does that pan out? Well, one, if we get a back and forth shootout, it can, because you're going to want both quarterbacks. And 2, if Mahomes throws 4 or 5 touchdowns to 4 or 5 different receivers. But if, on the other side, if we get Herbert throwing it, maybe concentrating on Mike Williams, maybe on Gerald Everett, who knows, that is going to be a path where that can make sense. It's crazy. It's showdown, but I love embracing that type of variance. I mean, we've seen many, many different types of builds win, and that's kind of what I want to embrace. So what to get the ultra different, since we both agree that Chargers 4-2 stacks likely to be more popular than, say, Chiefs 4-2 or Chiefs 5-1. What are you doing here? Are you bumping the min exposure for KC in the 4-2 and the 5-1? Should we do that to see kind of what the builds look like?
I think that's fine. I mean, I think you can go either way here. Yeah. So bumping, I mean, I actually think my gut is to cap the max exposure for the Chargers. So I might say, this number is a really good tool for me when I don't know how much to bump somebody to. I use this as kind of a guideline. So I might say maybe I just play max 20% Chargers 4 stacks, and then max, what do we have over here on this one? Max 5% Chargers 5 stacks. Just kind of as a rough guideline here. Good note here. This is a good thing always to bring up. So we get a message here that says we can't meet your exposures, right? So at this point, it's saying, okay, we no longer have 50 builds in your 1500 that can do everything you're trying to do. This is, to me, generally a sign that I'm going to back off a little bit. And I'm going to tone down some of the recent adjustments that I've just made. One other thing that I think might be interfering here a little bit is we've got those quarterback exposures here cranked up. So maybe we'll bring those down a little bit. Something like, I don't know, 25% and 20% for these guys instead might give us a little bit more flexibility there.
And that's why I, at least, if you have the time to run multiple builds, that's why I'm not in step 1 putting any min max in there for showdown. I don't want that much control early. I would rather have the control judged kind of by the game script, or altering the projection slightly to fit the bias that I see coming out. That's what I've done, just so that you can make these type of adjustments on the back end as well.
Yeah, I mean, this to me seems like the biggest edge on the slate that I've seen so far. We have just a weird situation here where people are naturally going to build lineups that are heavier overweight to the underdog because of the way that the average projections work out. I mean, it seems like building Chiefs 4 stacks and Chiefs 5 stacks are free tonight.
Let's look at these. Let's look at the Charger 4s, and then let's look at the Chiefs 4s and show people how to easily do it. This is my favorite part of this, because once I have everything done, I always click this button and I always pull it over so you can see all, I think it's 6 builds at once.
Yep. Yeah, so we can filter. So right now we're just looking at only our lineups with our Chargers 4 stacks. So if you want to dive in a little bit further, you want to take a closer look, you could do this pretty easily. And I think, these lineups kind of tell the story that I was expecting, right? You're getting Chargers 4 stacks because there's so many cheap Chargers because Keenan Allen's out. So you're getting it's like the DeAndre Carter builds, the Gerald Everett, Trey McKitty showing up in a couple builds here. Josh Palmer is probably going to just be a very, very highly owned value play. One other thing you can do is if you see, I always want to point this out, if you see a lineup that you kind of like, but you just want to maybe you're looking at this and you're like, man, Trey McKitty, really? And you want to pull this up, you can edit this and start making some changes. Obviously don't have a lot of salary left in this build, but say you wanted to get up to a different play here, or maybe you want to even start removing a couple different guys from this. We could maybe take out Kelsey or something like this. And all of a sudden we're looking at like maybe a Chiefs onslaught kind of build. Like we put Mike Williams in, and then we find some cheap value play or something like that.
One thing I also did too, kind of to fit my script, I wanted to be under on, because I think some of these values from the Chargers are going to be overplayed. McKitty, I think Palmer, I think some of those guys are just going to be overplayed. So I manually under projected them. I'm never just fading them. I think that's wrong. I under projected them, but then what I also did is since I went in there and they negatively correlate with Mike Williams, I bumped up Mike Williams. So those were some, I used it for research, and I saw that negative correlation there. If those guys do less, but I still like Herbert, I got to bump someone up. And so Mike Williams is the guy. I hope people are going to be under on him. I hope they see the production. And they don't know that. They don't know. They might I hope there's a portion of the people out there that don't realize how good this guy is, and he's going to be like, man, he could absolutely break the slate. So if Herbert locks into him, that's going to be most likely the path for a Palmer, Carter, or one of those guys to fail. The other thing I did was Jalen Guyton. I know that they're going to want to. So the Chiefs, who are they? McDuffie. So one of their main cornerbacks, guys in the secondary there is out tonight. And I know that the Chargers are going to want to take a few deep shots. Jalen Guyton was their guy last year. He's a speedster. Is he a high, like snap guy? No, not at all. So it's definitely a Millie Maker type play, but I gave him a slight bump and capped his ownership. And so that was one, manual type thing that I did to get a little bit different on this slate, since I think the Chargers values are going to be a little bit overowned. And what happened that I found was in my 4-2 builds where I'm heavy on the Chiefs side, it gets rid of, I don't have many. It's usually Mike Williams or Herbert in there. That's my 2 from one side, and then all Chiefs guys. And I love the texture of that build. Yeah. And so keep that in mind when you're out there, making your builds and you're multi-entering. Always give it a last look. And that's why I like that page right there where you can look at all the different builds. You can press what is that? Like a little flashlight type thing or spotlight.
Yeah, there's a little button here. Oh yeah, the magnifying glass is what it is. The
magnifying glass. Yeah. There you go. That makes more sense than a flashlight. Anything else? I know all right. So there's a millionaire maker on FanDuel as well. I often neglect FanDuel a little bit too much, but do we want to hit FanDuel real quick? I know we're running a little bit short on time, but monster game tonight. I mean, we could dive in if you want. We can wrap up DraftKings for us, and then let's touch on FanDuel real quick.
Yeah, I mean, final thoughts on DraftKings. Again, I think there's a lot of different angles to go here tonight. I like the idea of loading up on the Chiefs heavy builds, just because it just seems like a weird situation where the average projections are taking people to overvalue the underdog. Vegas is telling us most likely outcome here is the Chiefs win this game, and everybody's going to build, 4 Chargers builds. I'm probably going to do everything I can do to get away from it.
23. All right. 23-20 Chiefs. I like that you got the Chiefs of the W there, but I don't see it, man. I don't see how these defenses stop each other. Like Herbert is a monster. This dude is one of the most efficient quarterbacks out there. And it's going to be back and forth. The only way it's ugly is it's just week 2 and it's a short week. I'm not seeing it though. I think both these teams are dialed in, and they're 2 of the best quarterbacks in the league. That's the difference maker. That's why I think we see points here. I'd be blown away if it's 23-20 game.
Yeah, I think I'll probably play a couple builds in there where I'm playing maybe a lower scoring battle. One thing that, I don't think anybody's talking about here is these running backs. I think, CEH and Eckler both make for interesting captain options here in a game where it seems like almost everybody's just going to target the receivers and the quarterbacks. So, I could potentially see a situation where we do get, the Chiefs go out in front, CEH gets really involved on the ground. The Chargers can't stop him and the game kind of just gets grinded out a little bit. And we end up with 28-13. That's a game script that I could see a little bit more.
You can run on the Chargers too. I mean,
Yeah.
we saw this line last week early. CEH was very efficient on the ground, but it was far more efficient for Mahomes to, what he start the game? Like 11 for 11.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you can do that, that's the most efficient thing in the game right there, far more than running the ball. So I'm with you. I think if teams want to kind of slow it down, and we've seen the Chargers try to do that, we could see, the running backs get some production. I just think it's like, man, look at all the gadget plays that they run at the goal line. We saw 2 to CEH last week. So the Chargers are going to be ready for that. Good linebackers. I think they're going to be better at adjusting to that. So I'm a little lower on CEH. I do like McKinnon though. Just the second RB2 there. We know he's going to get in there. I mean, with Kansas City, it's, man, they love rotating in the running backs. So I definitely have a little bit of McKinnon on DraftKings. So you have FanDuel pulled up?
Yeah, we got FanDuel pulled up here. Any thoughts right off the bat?
Walk us through it, I guess, and any glaring differences between FanDuel and DraftKings that you see in showdown formats for tonight's game. I mean, I'll be running the same scripts. I think Chiefs win. I think they win big tonight. I know people are gonna be like, yeah, he's a homer, he's a donkey, is what it is. I think they win by double digits tonight. What I saw from Mahomes was just so good. But Herbert and company, they're gonna put up points too. So that's the script I'm playing, and I'm gonna play it on both sides tonight. So very similar to what I walked through, but I'm even more extreme than kind of what we went through earlier.
So, and that's exactly what I would recommend. FanDuel is a little bit different. There's 2 big game dynamic things with the way that their single games work. One is that you don't have to pay more to roster somebody in the MVP spot, right? On DraftKings, you have to pay 1.5 to earn the 1.5 points that they score. On FanDuel, it's the same price to play somebody in the flex as it is in the MVP. So the pool of viable MVPs, I think, goes down by a lot. Combined with that, you're only picking 5 guys instead of 6. So there's just a lot less viable possible lineup constructions that work. I think you're going to get duped a lot more playing on FanDuel. I would say if you've got an angle of the way that you think the game is going to go, like whatever you're doing on DK to get there, double that effort on FanDuel, because it's hard to get unique. I think it's much harder to build good unique lineups on FanDuel. So if you're playing a particular angle, you want to play the quarterbacks and you want to play the over and you want to play the Chiefs win the game, go all in on that, because I think it's harder to get to different lineup constructions playing on FanDuel.
Yeah, I think, when I look at it, this ownership really fits with what I was thinking as far as what's the safe approach, right in line with what you were saying. Mike Williams, look at him right there. That's the one guy that I think has, and Kelsey, as far as playmakers go, that could break it open. Now, what you want for a Kelsey or Mike Williams to be able to outscore Herbert and Mahomes, I think you need a lot of production. But those are the 2 likely guys that I think could be the ones to do it. But I don't know. What you could do is go all in on either Herbert or Mahomes. Maybe Mahomes surely is going to be the more popular, you would think. So maybe you just make a stand and you go 100% Herbert. When I look at it tonight, I feel very confidently that we're going to see a quarterback in there at the captain or MVP spot at the end of the night, just with how they distribute the ball. So if it was me, I'd be taking a stand one way or the other, or I would be looking at a Mike Williams or Kelsey. That's kind of what I would do at the MVP spot.
Yeah, I agree. And on a FanDuel, again, just because that pricing difference, if you're going to play somebody at the MVP, you have to believe that they can be the highest overall scorer in the whole game. So if you're playing Mike Williams, Kelsey, Eckler, those kinds of guys at the MVP, they have to outscore both quarterbacks for that lineup to work. And if they don't get there, the lineup's not going to work. So for me, I mean, my pool of MVPs I'd be playing on FanDuel is like both QBs and maybe those top 3 guys. After that, I just think you're talking about way too thin of an outcome for it to be worth it. And you can see it in the pool over here, right? We're way more concentrated in a 1,500 build on FanDuel than we were on DK. Almost 60% of our lineups are already just soaked up by the 2 quarterbacks alone. So the one other thing, and I would say, one more thing there is I'd probably, do the same thing here and just be really aggressive with the lineup construction and just play these 4 stacks on FanDuel and just hope that like one of these teams blows out the other, because it's going to be an underappreciated game script, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. So on FanDuel, the difference, obviously, no 5-5-1s. I kind of like that because 3-2 is going to be very popular.
Yeah.
And so just by eliminating that now, I mean, like you said, there's going to be a lot of dupes, but at least you're creating the potential to be unduped. And I think if your goal is to just try to get uniques, fade Mahomes or Herbert at MVP and hashtag good luck to you tonight if you do that. I don't have the cojones to do that, but maybe you do out there. And if you're targeting that milli maker up top, that could be the route to go. If you were doing that, please use a guy that has upside. I lean towards Mike Williams or Kelsey, those 2 guys. But man, I don't like Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't see it. Like I don't like when you look at his routes. I mean, he's gonna have to run as pure as you possibly can, fall into the end zone twice, rack up a ton of catches to get there. So for me, Mike Williams or Kelsey, but I'm just gonna be locked in on Mahomes, Herbert for sure.
Yeah. Last note on FanDuel too, contest selection kind of thing. I'm an MME guy. I always play a lot of lineups on any given slate. I think if you're going to play on FanDuel and this kind of game type anyway, maybe you target a little bit more of the single entry 3 max kind of stuff, some smaller tournaments where you're competing just against less lineups to kind of counteract the fact that it's so much easier to get duped over there. I think you get some soft fields in those contests too. So.
Yeah. No, Jordan, very good. So, we are just about hitting our time. We usually like to keep this around 45 minutes, right around the lunchtime. But man, we had such a fun game to break down tonight. What do we have coming up? We got the Print Factory Showdown edition with BigT, JSU, and Tambo. That is coming up later today. I believe 4:45 Eastern time. Hoop. He put out his daily assist over here at Rumpier Sports for the members, and Hoopster is becoming a MME GOAT. He took down the 50K MLB the other night using SABERSIM, 100K a few weeks before that, and he's been, I think, the last few milli makers. I think he's had the second highest lineup there, so he's just missed it by 1. So his time is coming. I have an idea of where he's going to be, but if you want an idea of where he's going to be at, go watch the daily assists. So, Jordan, any final thoughts, tonight with the game, like any sneaky kind of key plays, any like bold predictions that you see panning out tonight?
Okay. Yeah. So last final thoughts. I'll say it again one more time. I like overweight Chiefs builds, and I really feel like there's a game script where one of those running backs sneaks into that optimal captain spot that everybody is sleeping on. I don't hear anybody talking about the running backs in the game here tonight, and it just seems weird given the overall totals on these teams, the talent of those guys. So I'm in on both starting running backs at the captain, guys I want to be overweight on.
Yeah, very good. I'm with you. I love the 4-2 with the Chiefs. Mahomes, I think he's going to have a big night. Love MVS. Nice bounce back spot for him. I know they want to get him involved, especially in the deep ball. Kelsey is going to be Kelsey. And my one takeaway is some of these values that are hitting a lot of the builds on the Chargers side, I'm under projecting them. It's not anything against the Chargers. It's just I like Mike Williams. He's one of my favorite bringbacks on the Chargers side. So that is where I am. All right, everyone. We're going to wrap this up right now. We're going to do this each and every week. So we'll be back next week, most likely talking about the main slate. I haven't looked to see what game, unless it's just another really awesome game, we'll dive into Showdown. If it's not, we're going to give some love to the main slate again. As always, if you have any questions or anything that you want us to cover, hit me up to shoot me a DM, or if you have any ideas of things you just want us to cover on this show, shoot me a message. You know, we can't read minds over here. So don't hesitate to message me on any different topic that you want me to cover. You know, there's no stupid questions, just stupid people, right, Jordan?
That's
No,
right.
just joking. Again, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a lot. Best of luck to everyone. Run Pier tonight. I want to see some screenshots up there. I want to see the Run Pier or SABERSIM logo at the top tonight, shipping that millie. With that, I'm AP. That's Jordan. Simon, get us out of here.